There is a 4-year-old boy in this story. His name is Henry. He never speaks. He doesn't appear in a single scene. He has been dead for a year before the first word is spoken. And yet, he is the reason a bounty hunter turns his horse around, the reason a stranger reaches out his hand in the rain, the reason justice finally finds its way to a federal judge's desk in San Antonio. Some names carry more weight after they're gone than they ever did in life. This channel tells the stories the frontier tried to bury, of mothers and fathers, of grief that becomes purpose, of love that refuses to be the last thing standing. What you carry can either break you or build something that outlasts you. Clara and Eli chose to build. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear that today. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. Thank you for being part of our community.
That summer had no kindness in it, especially not in July, on that stretch of road where the rain had turned the red earth to a thick gumbo. The heat just pressed down on everything. Clara had been walking for 3 solid days. The horse she'd borrowed threw a shoe and went lame 6 miles back. There was no time to feel sorry for herself. She just tied the horse to a tree and kept moving. Stopping was a luxury she just did not have. Her boots were soaked clean through, and the hem of her only dress was stained the color of rust from the mud. Every step was a fight, like the ground itself wanted to pull her under. She carried one canvas bag with a knotted strap. Inside was $3.40, a picture of her James, her mother's little Bible, and a sealed leather satchel. That satchel was the reason James was dead, and she would die before she let it go. She hadn't cried once. She knew if she started, she might never stop. So she just walked. She walked until the blisters on her feet broke open, and she wrapped them in strips torn from her petticoat. She walked through a cold night rain that made no sense for July. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, with 12 miles still to San Antonio, her legs just gave out. She went down hard in the mud, her bag landing with a soft thud. She stayed there on her hands and knees, head bowed, rain dripping from her hat. "I can't go any further," she said to no one, or so she thought. "You aim to stay down there for long?" The voice came from behind her. It was a low, level sound. Not mean, but not gentle either. Clara didn't jump. She was too tired to be scared. Her hand just slowly closed around a small rock in the mud. Then she turned on her knees to face him, the rock held high. He sat on a big chestnut horse about 20 feet away. He was tall in the saddle, a man who looked more at home on a horse than on his own 2 feet. His face was weathered and still under a wide-brimmed hat, with gray eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He wasn't holding a gun. His hands were resting easy on the reins. Still, she kept the rock raised. "I'll ask you again," he said with a strange kind of patience. "You plan on staying down there?" "I plan on getting up," Clara told him, "when I'm good and ready." "Your time might be running out, ma'am." "Don't you call me ma'am." He tilted his head a little. "What should I call you then?" "Nothing," she said. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "I surely don't." He just sat there on his horse in the rain, watching her with those flat gray eyes. Clara's arm began to tremble from sheer exhaustion. She finally lowered the rock. "There are men coming," she said, her voice flat. "If you're smart, you'll ride the other way." "How far back?" he asked. "Maybe half a day?" He nodded, taking that in. "How many of them?" "3, she said. A flicker of something changed in his eyes, like he was doing some quick arithmetic. "They working for Decker Voss?" he asked. Clara froze. The world went silent except for the rain and the sound of the horse shifting its weight. The man on its back just waited, like he already knew the answer. "How do you know that name?" she whispered. Because I rode out of Redstone Creek 4 days ago, he said. And Decker Voss paid me $50 to find a woman named Clara Whitmore and bring her back. The silence that fell after that was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. Her hand went to her bag, protecting the satchel inside. "I'm not going to do it," the man said quietly. She looked up at him, her eyes narrowed. "Not gonna bring you back." "Why not?" she asked, her voice hard. She wasn't about to trust the first kind word she'd heard in weeks. He swung down from the horse with slow, deliberate movements. He was even taller on the ground. He took off his hat and she saw his face clearly. A thin white scar ran from the corner of his eye down his jaw. And his eyes, she realized, weren't cold. They were just tired, a kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. "My name is Elias Calhoun," he said. "I've been a bounty hunter for 9 years, and I have never, ever harmed a woman. I don't aim to start now." "That's a fine speech," Clara said. "It doesn't answer my question." He put his hat back on. "Get up," he said, his voice direct. "I'll help you onto the horse. We need to get moving." "You didn't answer me." "I know," he said. He held out his hand, just offering it. "I'll answer you when you're not sitting in the mud." Clara looked at his hand, then at the empty road stretching out in both directions. She took his hand. His name was Elias Calhoun, and he was not a man of many words. She sat behind him on the horse, whose name she learned was Cannon. She held her bag tight and watched the muddy road pass by. They rode for nearly an hour before he spoke again. "The men behind us," he said. "You know their names? Harlan Briggs, and another they call Copper. The third one they called him Dutch." "Harlan Briggs," Elias said, and his voice went hard as iron. "Briggs is the one Voss sends when he wants something burned." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "My husband's barn," she said softly. 6 months ago. James thought it was a lightning strike." "Was it?" Elias asked. "James said it was lightning," she repeated, but her tone made it clear she had never truly believed it. He didn't push. He just nodded and kept the horse moving. "Where are we going?" she asked after a while. "A town called Dusty Creek," he said. "About 8 miles from here. Miles. We need to head northeast. There is a woman there, Nell Briggs, who runs the only decent place between here and San Antonio. And no, she is no relation to Harland. She owes me a good turn. More importantly, she plain dislikes Voss. Clara stated that nobody likes Voss, but that does not mean they will stand against him. Nell will." "Nell. Eli, how can you be sure? Because he tried to buy her place 3 years back, and she returned his money by throwing it through his window, 1 coin at a time." Clara almost let out a laugh. It vanished as quickly as it came. The heavy feeling settled back in her chest. She clutched the canvas bag. "My husband was James Whitmore. He kept the books for Decker Voss for 4 years. James was an honest man, you see. He was too honest for the real work Voss wanted, which was to make the numbers look right. Voss has been buying up land, or what he calls buying. What he really does is threaten folks off their homesteads and bribe officials to change documents. And if someone refuses to leave," Eli said quietly. "Yes, James kept records," Clara went on. "It was not some big plan for justice. He was just a man who kept track of things. It was how he was built. Then, about 8 months ago, he saw the name of a family he knew on a file he was supposed to fake. He stopped talking for a moment. The Henrys, Garland and May Henry. They had 3 children. Voss drove them out of Caldwell County last spring." "I know that name," Eli said softly. James came home that night and just stared at his plate. He did not sleep a wink. By sunup, he had copied every last detail into a second ledger. He hid it in the root cellar. She could see it all so clearly. James at the table, lamp burning low, his careful script filling the pages. He finally told me 6 weeks later. He planned to take it to a federal judge in San Antonio named Hargrove. He said Hargrove was the only judge in the whole district that Voss had not bought. Hargrove is a fair man, Eli confirmed. I have brought men before him. He is fair. Clara breathed out a long, shaky breath. James was meant to go in April. He was going to ride there all alone, quiet-like, so nobody would know. But someone always knows, Eli said. She did not have to explain. He understood how things worked in small towns with big money. Men who work for powerful people learn to keep their eyes open. They came on a Tuesday morning, she said. James was on the porch with his coffee. She stopped. Saying it out loud to this stranger on a muddy road felt different, heavier. You do not have to, Eli said, not looking back. I know, she replied. I want to. I need to. They shot him twice. I was inside and I heard it. By the time I reached the door, he was on the porch floor. 2 men on horseback were in the yard. One of them looked straight at me. He just looked, and then they rode off. They wanted you to know it was a warning, Eli said. Yes. Did you leave right away? No. I stayed to do what had to be done for James. Then I took the ledger and ran. Eli turned just enough to look at her. His eyes held not pity, but something that looked like understanding. How long ago? He asked. 23 days. He faced the road again. That is a long time to be running, he said. Yes, she whispered. It is. Dusty Creek was a town that did not ask questions. It was the kind of place you passed through, a collection of tired buildings on a single dirt road. Nell Briggs's place was called the Copper Kettle. It was the biggest building on the street, serving as a boarding house, a restaurant, and a saloon all at once. When Eli pushed the door open, the woman behind the counter looked up. Elias Calhoun, you look like you have been through the ringer. I have, he said. I need a room, a meal, and for you to be discreet. Nell Briggs was somewhere between 40 and 60. She had sharp, dark eyes that missed nothing. She set down the glass she was cleaning and looked at Clara. Who is this? Someone who needs the same things I do, Eli replied. And a locked door tonight. Nell's gaze rested on Clara. Whitmore, she said, not as a question. Clara lifted her chin. Yes. I heard about your husband, Nell said in a level voice. I am sorry for it. Thank you. Voss's men came through 3 days ago asking about you. What did you tell them? I told them I had not seen any young widow, that any smart woman would take the south road, not the north. Nell slid a key across the bar. They took the south road. They will figure it out, Eli said, by morning at the latest. We have to be gone before dawn. Food will be ready in an hour, Nell said. Room is at the top of the stairs, second door. There is a bolt. I assume you want separate rooms. Yes, they both said at the same time. In the small room, Clara washed her face and changed into her better blue dress. She had wanted to save it for San Antonio, for Judge Hargrove's office. She thought a clean dress might make her story more believable, and she knew how sad that sounded. She sat on the bed and opened the leather satchel, looking through the ledger for the 100th time. It was the only thing that gave her a sense of control. James's neat handwriting filled every page, names, dates, and amounts. It was a careful record of a crime. He had written it like a testimony, clear and undeniable. 47 families, she had counted. 47 families in 3 counties run off their land over 6 years. All of it was documented in her husband's careful hand. She tied the ledger shut and put it away. A knock came at the door. It was Eli. Dinner is ready. I will be right down. There was a pause. Are you all right? She thought about the question. I am upright, she said. That is the best I can do right now. After another moment, he said, that is enough. She heard his footsteps move down the hall. They ate at a small table in the corner. The meal was simple beans and cornbread, but it was the best food Clara had tasted in 3 weeks. She was so hungry it didn't matter what the food tasted like. She saw that Eli ate the same way, all business, like a man who never knew where his next meal was coming from. You said you'd answer my question, she finally managed to say. He put down his fork and wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I did, he said. Why didn't you take me back to Voss? He stared into his coffee for a second. Because I have a son. Clara just waited. Had, he corrected, and the word hurt him to say. His name was Henry. He was 4 years old. The whole feel of the room changed right then. Abilene, she said, her voice soft. Last year. His head snapped up. You know about it? Nell told me. She said it was a fire. It was a fire, he confirmed, his jaw tight. My wife, Eleanor, and Henry were inside. I was working 3 towns away by the time I got home. He stopped and set his cup down. Fire inspector said it was a faulty stove. But you don't think so? The stove was brand new, he said, his voice flat. Put in 2 months before, and there was a man in Abilene, a rancher named Cowboy. He'd been fighting Voss over water rights for 2 years, lived 4 doors down. Eli's voice was steady, too steady. It was the sound of a man who had practiced a story in his head until it lost its power to break him. Calloway gave up the week after the fire, signed Voss's papers, and moved his family clean to Kansas. Oh, my Lord, Clara whispered. I could never prove it, Eli said. Looked for 6 months. Found nothing. Voss is careful, she said. He doesn't leave messes. Until now, it seems. Her hand instinctively went to her bag. Eli, she began, using his first name without thinking. He didn't seem to notice. James wrote everything down, names, dates, what they were paid for. He kept a perfect record. Her voice was steady as his. Abilene is in there. The muscle in his jaw jumped. You're certain? I have read every page 100 times, she said, holding his gaze. I am certain. Elias Calhoun laid his hands flat on the table, staring at them. Henry, he said, the name spoken quiet and low like a prayer. Henry, Clara repeated, because a name like that deserved to be said by more than one person. He looked up, and for the first time the hard emptiness in his gray eyes gave way to something raw and exhausted. I'll get you to Harrove, he said, whatever it takes. I know, she told him. I knew it the moment you offered me your hand on that road. You threw a rock at me first. I did, she agreed. Then I took your hand. I suppose that says a lot about me. A faint flicker, not quite a smile, touched the corner of his mouth. Get some sleep, Miss Whitmore. We ride at 4. But she didn't sleep. She lay on the bed and thought about James writing in his ledger. She thought about a 4-year-old boy named Henry who used to catch frogs. She thought about 47 families and a judge in San Antonio who might be their last hope. And she thought about Elias Calhoun, sitting downstairs with a weight no one had ever helped him carry. He hadn't said, none of your business. He'd said, not yet. That was the kind of man he was, the kind who paid his debts. James had been like that too. You kept your records, James, she thought. I will make sure someone reads them. At 3:30, a soft knock came not on her door, but on the wall beside it. It was quiet and deliberate. She was up and moving before she even knew it. She opened the door just a crack. Eli stood there, already dressed. His face was serious, but not panicked. Harlan Briggs just rode in, he said quietly. He's at the stable, alone for now. The others are likely circling around from the south. Clara gripped the doorframe. He found us. He doesn't know we're in this house. Not yet. Eli's eyes were like stone. We have maybe 20 minutes. Get your bag. Leave the rest. Eli, she said, his name coming easy now. Clara, he answered, the first time he'd used hers. We can't get to Harrove if they cut us off in every town. I know we need another way. I know that too, he said. There's a trail through Blackthorn Pass. It's east of the main road. Adds half a day, but Voss's men don't know that country. I know Blackthorn Pass, she said. He gave her a curious look, the same one from the road when she'd known about Harrove. My father had a cattle lease in the hill country when I was a girl. I know every pass between here and the Guadalupe. She stepped back from the door. Give me 2 minutes. You have 1.5, he replied. Then quit talking and let me use it. She thought she heard a quiet, surprised sound from the hallway that might have been a laugh in another life. They slipped out the kitchen door. Nell held it open, pressing a bundle of cornbread into Clara's hands. Road east of the creek bed, Nell whispered. Follow it past the old Miller place. It'll get you to the base of Blackthorn. Thank you, Clara said. Don't thank me, Nell said, her dark eyes sizing her up. Just get to Harrove. She gave Eli a look that was a whole conversation. Something like history and trust passed between them. And you come back from this. Nell, Eli started. Just go, she said. They went. Eli had the horses ready. The Texas night was clear, and the wet earth smelled of cedar after the rain. They rode east, away from a lone lantern in the distance. Clara refused to look back. Once they were clear of town, she spoke. You never did answer my question. Eli rode on for a moment. Voss offered me $50, he said, his voice flat. And I took it. At first it was just a job. Bring a woman in. I told myself what happened after that was not my concern. So what changed, she asked. I found you on the road, he answered. On your knees, raising a rock at me. Not a gun, a rock. You did not have the energy to be scared, just enough to fight. His voice went quiet. It made me think of Eleanor. If she had just had a chance to fight back, or if one person had decided not to look away. Clara understood. You could not give that to her, she said softly. But you could give it to me. Ahead of them, the dark Texas hills waited. Thank you, Eli, she whispered. Do not, he said, that gruffness of his somehow making it mean more. Blackthorn Pass was a liar. From a distance, it looked like a fair challenge. Up close, it was another story entirely. The rain had turned the narrow trail into a slick mess, something worse than mud or water. Cannon, Eli's horse, handled it with patience. But the gray mare Clara rode kept shying, sensing trouble. She will not like the middle part, Clara said. You have been this way before? Eli asked. Twice, she said, but never after a week of July rain. Can we make it through? She gave him the only answer she had. I do not know, probably. The only sounds were the horses struggling through the mud. Clara tried not to think about Harlan Briggs behind them. How far back do you reckon they are? She finally asked. Briggs rode in alone, Eli said, glancing back. He would wait for his men. If they left at first light, they are about 3 hours behind us. Briggs is never cautious, she pointed out. No, he agreed. 3 hours. Just then the gray mare slipped. Clara steadied her, her hand firm on the horse's neck. Her name is Rosie, she said softly. Nell told me. Said she has had her for 6 years and she would sure like her back. The middle section was worse than she remembered. The path narrowed until only a single horse could pass, and the ground became treacherous. Eli leaned low over Cannon's neck, murmuring to him in a steady voice that calmed the animal. But Rosie stopped cold. She planted all 4 feet and refused to budge. Clara knew what she had to do. She slid off the saddle. Taking the reins, she stepped onto the narrow ledge herself, the rock wall on one side and a drop on the other. I have got her, she called back, her voice low and even as she coaxed the horse forward. Slowly, 1 step at a time, Rosie followed. When they reached the other side, Clara just leaned her head against the horse's neck. Eli rode back to her. She looked up. Do not you say a word. I was not going to, he said. You had a look on your face. My face does that sometimes, he replied. I do not always mean it. An almost laugh escaped her. Her husband, James, used to be able to do that, to make her laugh right in the middle of a bad time. She never expected to find that again. Without another word, she swung back into the saddle. 3 hours, Clara said, her voice tight. Maybe less now, Eli answered. Let us ride. They came down from Blackthorn Pass near noon. The country opened up, and the red clay road stretched south toward San Antonio. They both stopped, searching the empty landscape. Trouble had a certain look, and right now the road looked clean. How far to the next town? She asked. Mesquite Springs is 6 miles off, he said. We cannot go through there. There is a rancher, Audie Colton. His land runs near the road. We can water the horses there and bypass the town. You know him? Clara asked. I brought his nephew in on a theft charge 4 years ago, Eli said. Audie knew the boy was guilty. He respected me for doing my job, more or less. That was not exactly reassuring. Just then, they both heard it. Hoofbeats coming fast from the road ahead. Eli grabbed his rifle. Clara reached into her bag. A rider burst around the curve at a dead run. He pulled his horse up short when he saw them. Before he could speak, Eli had the rifle aimed. The young man, maybe 20 years old, threw both his hands in the air. I am not, he stammered. Who are you? Eli said. My name is Roy Tanner. I am a deputy out of Mesquite Springs. He had a small, bent badge on his vest that showed he was new to the job. His voice was shaky with nerves. Mr. Calhoun, I know who you are. Nell Briggs sent a rider to warn Sheriff Dawes. I was told to find you. Eli kept his rifle aimed. Why is that? Roy slowly reached inside his coat. His eyes locked on the rifle and pulled out a folded paper. Because Harlan Briggs and 2 of his men passed through town an hour ago. They were asking everyone if they had seen a woman traveling with a bounty hunter. Roy held out the paper. And because Sheriff Dawes received a wire from San Antonio, Judge Hargrove is asking why Clara Whitmore has not arrived. A heavy silence fell between them. Eli looked over at Clara, who was already watching him. Hargrove knows I'm coming, she said. It seems so, Eli replied. He nodded toward Roy. Bring that here. Roy carefully nudged his horse forward and handed the paper to Eli, making sure to keep his hands in plain sight. He moved like a young man who knew the person with the gun had every right to be cautious. Eli read the message from the judge. His face did not change, but Clara saw his shoulders tense up. He passed the paper to her. The wire was brief. It said, Miss Whitmore, I know about your husband's work. I am waiting for you. Come straight here. Do not stop, and do not trust the local law. Clara read it again. Do not trust the local law. She glanced at Roy, who seemed to understand the awkward situation. Sheriff Dawes wanted me to tell you he knows what that wire says, Roy explained. He is not insulted. Judge Hargrove is a careful man for good reason. The sheriff also wants you to know that in 8 years he has never taken a single penny from Decker Voss. He paused for a moment. He thought you might be wondering. I was, Clara admitted. He also said... Roy paused, choosing his words. He said Briggs and his men are now on the main road between you and San Antonio. That leaves only one other path, Eli said. Through Colton's land. Roy seemed relieved. Yes, sir. But Audie Colton does not let anyone cross his property. I know, Eli said. You have to ask him in person, face to face. He does not trust messages. I know that too, Eli replied. I will go talk to Colton. Roy looked uneasy. Mr. Calhoun, last time Audie Colton saw you, he told the sheriff that if he ever saw you again, he would run you off his land with a shotgun. Eli stood quietly for a moment. That sounds about right, Clara said softly. Eli gave her a sharp look, but her expression was calm. I will talk to Colton, he said again, his voice firm. Roy accepted this and turned his horse around. I will ride back and watch the south road. If Briggs comes back this way, I will fire a shot. 1 shot means you turn around, Eli instructed. 2 shots means you run. Understood. Roy gave a small salute and looked at Clara one last time. It was the look of a young man still surprised by what people could endure. Then he rode away. When the dust settled, Eli finally lowered his rifle. Audie Colton, Clara said. The same Audie Colton whose nephew you arrested for stealing a horse. I brought him in, Eli corrected her. Audie knew it was the right thing to do, even if he did not like it. He turned his horse, Cannon, off the road. Colton respects what is right. He just does not have to like it. There is a lot of that going around, Clara said, following him. 20 minutes later, they saw Colton's ranch house. It was a solid building of stone and old wood built by someone who planned to stay. The yard was tidy, and the fence was strong. And sitting on the porch was Audie Colton himself. He was a big man, well past 60, with a white beard and a shotgun resting on his lap. He spotted them from 100 yards away, but did not move. His hand rested on the shotgun like it was a familiar tool. Eli stopped his horse about 20 feet from the fence. Audie, it is Calhoun. Colton's voice sounded like rocks in a tin can. You have got a lot of nerve. That I do, Eli agreed. I need to cross your land. The last thing I told you was that I would fill you with buckshot if I saw you again. I remember. And yet you are standing on my property. I am. Colton's gaze shifted to Clara. He studied her for a long moment, taking in the worn dress and the exhaustion on her face. Who is she? He asked. This is Clara Whitmore, Eli explained. Her husband, James Whitmore, was killed by Decker Voss's men 23 days ago. She is carrying evidence about Voss's crimes and trying to reach Judge Hargrove in San Antonio. Voss's man is blocking the main road. Colton was quiet for a long time. Whitmore, he finally said. James Whitmore, the bookkeeper from Redstone Creek. Clara caught her breath. You knew him? I knew of him. Colton's jaw was tight. He sent me a letter 6 months back. He said he was going to make things right for some folks Voss had run off their land. He looked at Clara differently now. He said it was his wife who convinced him. He said she told him, a man who keeps records has a responsibility to what they say. The air left Clara's lungs. She had said those exact words to James one morning over tea, never thinking they were important. He wrote that down, she said, her voice trembling. He put it in the letter. Colton stood up, looking even bigger on his feet. He placed the shotgun inside by the door and walked down from the porch. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man on his own territory. He opened the fence gate. You can cross my land, Mrs. Whitmore. You and whoever you are with. He did not look at Eli as he said it. Eli rode through the gate without a word. Clara paused and looked at Colton. Thank you, she said. Do not thank me, he replied, looking up at her from under his bushy white eyebrows. Those 47 families lost everything. You just make sure what you are doing means something. I will, she promised. He nodded. As she rode past, he spoke again without looking at Eli. Calhoun. Eli stopped his horse. My nephew is out of jail, Colton said. He has been working my west pasture for 2 years now. He is a better man for what he learned. There was a pause. I still think you could have found another way. I could not, Eli said simply. I know, Colton admitted. That does not mean I have to like it. He closed the gate behind them. They rode in silence for a while. James wrote to him, Clara finally said. It sounds like James was building a case, Eli replied. He never told me about it. Maybe he did not want to frighten you. But we always told each other everything, she said, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. It was a strange kind of pain, learning something new about the man she had lost. Maybe he was still figuring it out, Eli suggested. Sometimes men hold things close until they understand them better. She looked at him. When did you tell Eleanor about Henry, about what you were afraid of? He was silent. You held it close, too, she said gently. For too long, he answered. She understood how protecting someone you love can create a distance, how silence that begins as kindness can become a wall. They reached the top of a low hill, and the land stretched out before them. In the distance, Eli saw a glint of sun on metal. He pulled his horse to a sudden stop. That is tin, he said. The roof of a building, about a half-mile away. Mesquite Springs is 6 miles south. That is not Mesquite Springs. She could see he was right. It was a single, low building with no road leading to it. A line cabin, maybe, or a relay station. A cabin built for men who didn't want to be found. Eli's hand froze on the reins. 3 horses outside, he said. She looked. He was right. 3 horses tied to the rail. Briggs came through Musket Springs an hour ago, she said slowly. Roy saw him on the main road with 2 other men. The meaning settled on them both. 3 horses, she repeated. Dutch, she said. He's not with Briggs. No, Eli said. He's not. He stared at the cabin, his face hard as he did the math on a problem that kept coming up wrong. He rode on ahead, she said. He knew about Blackthorn. Someone told him. Someone in Dusty Creek, Eli said. Or someone who knows this country better than Briggs. Clara's mind raced. Not Nell, not Roy, someone else they hadn't considered. How long has he been there, she asked. Long enough to be waiting, Eli answered. The cabin sat right in their path. Going around it would cost them hours and put them in the open after dark. He's not waiting to take me back, she said. Eli looked at her. Briggs wants me alive. Voss wants to know what I have, where the ledger is. Dutch doesn't care about those things. She met his eyes, the truth plain between them. He's waiting to make sure that ledger never reaches Harrov. It doesn't matter what happens to me. Eli stared at her. Something shifted in his face. It wasn't fear for himself. She knew he'd left that behind long ago. It was the same look he'd had when she said the name Abilene. I'm not going back, she said. I know, he replied. And I'm not stopping. I know that too. He turned his gaze back to the cabin, his hand moving toward the gun at his side. I'm fixin' to ride straight at that cabin, he said, his voice steady. That's a terrible idea, Eli, I shot back. That's not a plan, it's just you getting in the way. He looked at me, his gaze clear and direct. You ride south and you ride hard. When Dutch hears me coming from the north, he'll have to show himself. That'll buy you 60 seconds on that open ground, maybe 90. And what about you? I've faced worse odds than one man in a shack with a window. He said my name then. Eli Clara. He said it just like he did the night before, not soft or sweet, but sure as the sunrise. Judge Hargrove is 4 hours south of here. That ledger has 47 families in it. It's got Henry's name in it. His jaw was set like stone. Don't you sit there and argue with me. I'm not arguing, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm telling you that you are not nothing. Whatever you've been telling yourself since Abilene, you are not a distraction. You are not someone we can afford to lose, you understand me? James thought he was doing me a kindness, I said quietly, by not telling me things. He was wrong. So don't you decide for me what I can handle. Something shifted in his face, not softness, but a close cousin to it. 70 seconds, he said. That's all I'm asking for. You'd better still be breathing when I get back with Hargrove's men. I surely intend to be. Intend harder, I told him. He almost smiled. Then he turned his horse cannon to the north, and I wheeled Rosie south and dug in my heels. And that mare, who'd been skittish all morning, ran like she knew exactly what was at stake. Behind me, I heard Eli let out a yell, the sound of a man who decided he was going to be heard. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes forward, the bag with that ledger tucked tight under my arm, as the red Texas road opened up ahead of me. 4 hours to San Antonio, 47 families, and one name that mattered more than all the rest. Henry. I rode for him. I heard the shot when I was a quarter-mile away, a single, clean shot. One shot means turn around. My hands gripped the reins tighter. She urged Rosie onward, refusing to look back. The ledger had to matter more. Those 47 families had to matter more. Judge Hargrove was 4 hours south, and every wasted second gave Briggs another second to catch her. She told herself these things as she rode, the sharp crack of that single gunshot sitting like a stone in her gut. One shot meant turn back. That was the signal Roy had laid out. But she kept riding. Rosie, bless her heart, found another gear once the ground flattened out. Clara just let her run. The hot, empty road stretched on, the dry, red clay making the hoofbeats ring out clear. All Clara could hear was that ringing and a terrible silence. The silence was far worse than the shot. Then, maybe a half-mile later, she heard another horse coming up fast behind her. The rider was staying right on the road, not trying to flank her. That was the first good sign. Briggs would have come from the side, trying to run her off course. This felt different. She glanced back just enough to see Roy Tanner, his bent deputy badge glinting in the sun. He looked like a young man running on a decision he had not quite thought all the way through. She did not slow her pace. He just pulled his horse up alongside hers. "He is alive!" Roy yelled over the pounding hooves. Clara let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "But he is pinned down!" Roy shouted, the words tumbling out. Dutch came out of that cabin just like Eli figured, but he was not alone. There were two of them. Eli got Dutch, but the other man got him on the way out. "How bad is he?" she asked. "Still moving when I left. He told me to find you," Roy said. He looked over at her. "He said to keep riding and not to do anything foolish. His exact words." Clara considered that for a moment. "What does he call foolish?" "He was not specific," Roy admitted. "But I get the feeling he thinks most things you do are close to it." "That is fair." "It is," she said. "He also said—" Roy trailed off. "Spit it out, deputy." "He said if you turn around before you get to Hargrove, he will be mighty irritated with you." She almost smiled. Even then, that man knew the right words to use. "And Briggs?" she asked. "He is on the South Road, moving steady. He is not in a hurry. He is riding like a man who expects to meet you at your destination." Roy's voice grew tight. "He is not trying to catch you, Mrs. Whitmore. He is trying to beat you there." The truth of it settled on her like a shroud. San Antonio. Voss had to have men there. A man with his reach did not stop at the city limits. The coded message had been clear. Trust no local law. But Judge Hargrove himself was supposed to be clean. James had been sure of it, and she had to trust James. "How far ahead of us is he?" she asked. Roy's jaw was set. "He has a head start, maybe 40 minutes. 40 minutes. She had been riding hard for 20. That math was not on her side. "There is a shortcut," she said, more to herself than to him. Roy looked at her, waiting. "East of here, about 3 miles south. There is a creek crossing. It cuts a full hour off the ride to San Antonio. We would come in from the south, through the Stockyards district. Briggs will be watching the main road," Roy finished for her. "Briggs thinks I do not know this country," she said, turning Rosie east without breaking stride. Her knee brushed his as their horses fell in line. "He is wrong about that." They pushed through the brush country. Roy proved his worth, keeping pace and watching their surroundings with sharp eyes. He was a man to be trusted. "Your Sheriff Dawes," she said over the wind. "How well do you know him?" "Worked for him 2 years," Roy answered. "Did he ever take money from Voss?" "No, ma'am," Roy said without a second's thought. "You certain of that?" "My father had a ranch in Caldwell County," Roy said, his voice changing. "Voss's men came for his land 3 years back. Sheriff Dawes was the only lawman in 4 counties who even bothered to file a report on it. It did not stop them, but he put it on the record." He looked right at her then. "I know what you are carrying. I would like to think my father's name is in that ledger." "Tanner," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Page 41, she told him. "Gideon Tanner, 40 acres in Caldwell County, February 1879. Roy just stared straight ahead, his jaw working. He rode in silence for a good long while. When he finally spoke, his voice was all business again. "This creek crossing, how deep you reckon it will be?" "Knee-high in a dry year," she answered. "Today, Probably chest high and moving fast. You are sure Rosie can make it? She handled Blackthorn Pass this morning, Clara said. That is a yes. 20 minutes later, they found the crossing. It was not knee-high. The July rains had turned the gentle creek into a churning brown torrent. The water was wide, fast, and dangerous. Roy looked at it. That is chest high if we are lucky. Then we swim, Clara said, and she spurred Rosie into the water before she could lose her nerve. The cold shocked her, and for a terrifying moment she was just holding the ledger over her head, praying the horse beneath her would not panic. Rosie scrambled up the far bank, angry and dripping but safe. Clara was soaked to the bone, but the bag was dry. Roy followed a moment later, looking like he was questioning all his recent life choices. You always ride this way? He asked, wringing out his hat. Only for the past few days, she said, turning the horse south. They rode into San Antonio an hour and 10 minutes later. The sheer noise and smell of the city, smoke, horses, people, was overwhelming after days on the trail. But there was no time to gawk. Hargrove's office, she said to Roy. North side of the plaza. Brown building, second floor. He was already scanning the streets. I do not see Briggs, Roy said, his hand drifting toward his pistol. That means he is already here, she replied. Do not draw. Not yet. They rode at a steady pace, trying to look like they belonged there. 2 blocks from the plaza, a man stepped out from an alleyway. He was not Briggs. He was a stocky man with his hat pulled low. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, his voice calm and sure. Roy's gun was out in a flash. The man barely glanced at it. I work for Judge Hargrove, he said, looking straight at Clara. My name is Miles Cord. I am his clerk. He sent me to find you. Harlan Briggs showed up 40 minutes ago. He went straight into the federal building. He paused. He was in the duty marshal's office. The duty marshal is a fella named Pitts. He said the name like it was something spoiled. Pitts has been on Voss's payroll since 1879. Judge Hargrove knows it. He's been building a case. Cord, the judge's clerk, looked at my bag. He needs what you're carrying to close both cases. Roy looked from me to Cord. Prove you work for Hargrove, he challenged. Cord slowly pulled a folded paper from his coat. It was a short letter from the judge telling us Cord was his most trusted clerk for 11 years, and that we should come in through the courthouse annex on Commerce Street. He sent this morning, Cord said. He was expecting someone like Briggs. Where is Briggs now? I asked. With Pitts. Pitts is trying to cook up a reason to detain you and seize that ledger before you can reach the judge. It won't stand up in a real court, but it only has to hold long enough for them to get their hands on what you're carrying. Cord's eyes were dead serious. You have maybe 30 minutes before Pitts signs that paper. Then we move now, I declared. There's a problem, Cord said. Of course there was. I was starting to believe that every solution in this life just hid another problem behind it. Briggs didn't come alone. He left a man on Commerce Street watching that east entrance. Roy muttered something under his breath. I thought fast. The bag, the ledger, Judge Hargrove, and 30 minutes on the clock. A crooked marshal and a man watching the door. How many ways are there into the federal building? I asked Cord. 3 public doors, plus a loading dock on the west side, but it's bolted from the inside. Is there someone already in there who can open it? Cord paused. Hargrove's been in his office since 7 this morning. I looked at Roy. Can you get to the man on Commerce Street and keep him busy for 10 minutes without shooting anybody? She thought on it for a moment. Busy doing what? As long as it did not involve a dead body, she was fine with it. Then get to it. She looked at Cord. Take me to the loading dock. Cord started to speak. Now, she said. He turned and went. She followed him down a couple of alleyways and onto a side street. They moved quickly, the satchel bumping against her hip. The city of San Antonio hummed around them, paying no mind to a woman and a man walking with a purpose. There was nothing about them that would make you look twice. Clara found that strange. The biggest moments in a life could look so plain to the outside world. The loading dock was just as Cord said, a solid door, bolted from the inside. Cord knocked a pattern, 3 quick taps, then 2 slow ones. They waited. Clara counted to 32 before she heard the bolt slide back. The door creaked open and Judge Hargrove stood there. She had imagined a big, imposing man, someone whose honesty had hardened him. The real man was smaller, older, and his weariness was more comforting than strength would have been. He was maybe 65, gray-haired and slender, with eyes that saw everything. He looked from her to the bag. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "Judge Hargrove," she answered. "We have less than 30 minutes. Come on in," he said. The hallway of the federal building was plain and smelled like old files and floor polish. Hargrove moved fast for his age, leading her up some stairs and into an office so full of books it looked like they were holding up the walls. He sat behind his desk. She took the chair across from him, while Cord stood by the door. She placed the leather bag on the desk and untied the cord with hands that were mostly steady. "My husband's name was James Whitmore," she said. "I know," Hargrove replied. "He wrote to me." She looked up surprised. "4 months ago," Hargrove said. He pulled a letter from his desk. It was James's handwriting, so neat and careful. Seeing it in this man's hand felt like a piece of James had come home to her. "He told me what he was putting together. He told me he had proof." Hargrove paused, a look of sadness on his face. "He said he was not sure how much time he had. He wanted me to know that if anything happened, his wife would know where to find the records, and that she would come." Clara sat frozen in her chair. "He was that sure of you," Hargrove said softly. "He should have told me," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "He said you would say that," the judge replied. She closed her eyes for just a second, picturing James at their kitchen table. A man who kept careful records, paid his debts, and had left her a map she never knew she was following. She opened her eyes and pushed the satchel toward the judge. "Then let's finish what he started," she said. Hargrove pulled the bag to his side of the desk and began to read. The only sound in the room was the turning of pages. Clara just sat there, the empty bag on her lap, listening to the city outside. After moving for so long, being still felt like its own kind of fall. She heard the office door open. She turned to see Harlan Briggs walk in. He had not come through the loading dock. He came right through the main door, the one Cord had closed but not locked. Cord was no longer by the door. He was pressed against a wall, a man behind him with a gun to his back. Briggs was not the big, crude man she had imagined. He was average, with an ordinary face. The only thing special about him were his eyes. They were tired, but it was a different kind of tired from Judge Hargrove's. The judge was tired from working too long. Briggs was tired from carrying a heavy burden for so long he forgot how to set it down. He looked at Clara, then at the satchel, and then at the papers spread across the judge's desk. "I need those pages," he said. "You need to leave my office," Hargrove said, not even looking up. "Judge, I am reviewing evidence in a federal case." Hargrove's voice was calm but carried 40 years of authority. "You are in a federal building without permission. Whatever Marshal Pitts told you, it does not apply in here." He turned another page. "And this building has 2 other exits you do not have covered." "I covered them an hour ago," Briggs snapped. "You covered the ones you know about," Hargrove said evenly. Briggs's jaw clenched. Clara had been watching his eyes. In the last 3 weeks, she had learned to tell when a man was bluffing. "You knew James," she stated. It was not a question. Briggs froze. "I found a letter in the house," she continued, her voice steady. "It was in his everyday desk drawer. It had no name on it, but I read it. He wrote it to an old friend. He said he was sorry to be on the opposite side of things from him." Briggs said nothing. "He never sent it," Clara said. "I do not know if he meant to. Maybe he was trying to decide if you were a man who could still be reached." She looked right into Briggs's tired eyes. "Could you have been?" The gunman behind Cord shifted his feet. Briggs raised a hand and the man stopped. "I have a job to do," Briggs said. You have a choice, Clara told him. James believed that. He wrote it in the letter to you. James is dead. Yes, she said, the word finally clean and hard. He is dead because he also made a choice. She looked straight at Briggs. What do you want to be, Harlan, when this is all over? Because Voss will be finished today or next year with this ledger or another one. James was not the only person who kept records. The room was silent. Then from downstairs, 2 gunshots rang out in a row. 2 shots meant run. It was Eli's signal. Everything happened in an instant. Briggs turned toward the sound. The gunman's attention broke for half a second. That was all Cord needed, was all. He threw a hard elbow back. The gun fired into the ceiling and plaster dust rained down on them all like a soft white snow. Judge Hargrove did not even flinch. He just held the ledger flat on his desk, protecting what mattered most. Clara was already moving. 2 shots meant run, but it also meant Eli was alive enough to fire them. Alive was all she needed to hear. She took the stairs 2 at a time. She heard Cord yell something and the judge say her name. She heard Briggs make a noise that was not pursuit, but something else. It sounded like a man making a hard choice, but she did not stop to see what it was. The stairs opened into a hallway and she ran toward the sound of the shots. She burst through a side door and almost ran straight into Roy Tanner. He was breathing hard with a cut over his eye, holding his pistol with both hands. He is outside, Roy said, loading Doc. He walked 4 miles with that bullet in him. He heard Briggs's man on Commerce Street and came in the back way. How bad is he? Bad enough he ought to be on the ground. Is he standing? Roy's face gave the answer. She ran past him. The loading dock door was open when she got there. Elias Calhoun was leaning against the door frame. One hand was on the wood for support, the other was pressed to his left side. His shirt was dark with blood from his shoulder to his belt. But he was on his feet, and his eyes were clear. His gun was still in the hand pressed to his side. He had held on to it the whole way. He saw her, and the first thing he asked was, "The ledger." "Hargrove has it," she told him. She saw a little bit of the tension leave his shoulders. "Briggs is upstairs," she said, putting a hand on his arm. "Came in the front." "I know." "I saw him go in. His jaw was tight. I could not get to him before." "It is handled," she said softly. He just looked at her. "Cord was in the room," she said. The judge never blinked. "And She trailed off, the rest of the words not needing to be said. "I talked to Briggs," he said, his voice strained. "You talked to him?" I asked, getting my arm under his to help him up. "Yes, while he was in the room with a gun." "His man had the gun," Eli corrected. "Briggs just had his face." "We can talk about your methods later," I told him, pulling his arm over my shoulder. "Right now, I need you to let me help you, and don't you dare say you're fine." I wasn't going to say I was fine. You were about to. I was about to say, "It's not as bad as it looks." "That's the same thing," I insisted. He let me take his weight, which told me just how bad it really was. Roy was on his other side in an instant, and together we moved Eli against the corridor wall. The 3 of us stood there in the quiet of a back hallway, while the rest of the building seemed to be sorting itself out. "Pitts," Eli said through gritted teeth. "The crooked marshal. He'll have heard the shots. He'll be on his way down." "Hargrove knows about Pitts," I said. "He told me he's been building a case." "Building a case won't help us in the next 5 minutes," Eli countered, his voice steady, but costing him dearly. "Pitts carries federal authority in this building. If he gets down here before Hargrove, then Hargrove needs to get down here first," Roy cut in. We both stared at him. "Someone ought to go get him," Roy said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Go," I said. Roy took off up the stairs at a run. I stayed with Eli, my arm holding him up, ignoring the blood soaking through his shirt onto my sleeve. "It's a graze," he said. "It is not a graze." "It grazed several things," he admitted. His face was pale beneath his tan, set with the look of a man running purely on stubborn will. I'd worn that look myself. "You could have stayed at the cabin," I told him softly. "No, I couldn't," he said. And then he said my name, Eli Clara, just as he always did, like it was a fact he had already settled. I wasn't going to sit in some relay cabin and wait to find out how this ended for you. You've been shot before? I asked. He paused just a little too long. This is not a productive conversation. In spite of it all, I almost laughed. I leaned my forehead against his shoulder, just for a second, feeling that he was real and warm and right here. Then I straightened up. This wasn't the time. Henry's name is in front of a federal judge right now, I said quietly. Eli was still for a moment. Yeah, he finally said. James put it there. You got me here. Both of them. We stood with that for a moment. Then the stairwell above us exploded with noise. It was the organized sound of authority taking control. I moved to stand in front of Eli out of pure instinct. Roy appeared first, taking the bottom steps 2 at a time. Behind him was Judge Hargrove, and behind the judge, 2 federal deputies who looked like they had been waiting a long time for this day. And walking behind them all, his hands in plain sight, was Harren Briggs, uncuffed. I went rigid, but Roy caught my eye. Wait, he said. I waited, my jaw tight. Judge Hargrove came to the bottom of the stairs and sized up Eli's condition. Then he looked straight at me. It's done, he said. Pitts is in custody. My deputies have been waiting in this building since this morning. He held up the satchel. The ledger is intact. I've read enough to open proceedings. A full indictment against Decker Voss will be drawn up before the week is out. I heard the words, and I understood them, but I had to run them through my head a second time just to believe them. It's done, I whispered. The legal process had begun. Justice was finally on its way. We have a long road ahead, Hargrove said, speaking like a man who had learned not to count on hope. But the groundwork is solid. What your husband started will stand. Clara saw the satchel. Inside was James's careful handwriting, detailing 6 years of Voss's destruction and the stories of 47 families. She had hauled that bag through hell and high water to get it here. Mr. Calhoun needs a doctor, she stated, the only words she could find. 2 blocks east, Hargrove nodded to a deputy. Take them. As they moved to help Eli, Clara started to follow. Mrs. Whitmore, she turned. Hargrove held out the satchel. These belong to you, he said gently. To James. I have what I need for the court. Clara clutched the satchel to her chest. After 23 long days, nobody was telling her where to go. The sudden stillness felt strange. Mud from a creek crossing was still on her boots, and dust from a fallen ceiling was tangled in her hair. There was blood on her sleeve, but it wasn't hers. She finally had what she came for. Following Eli and Roy, she walked out into the hot San Antonio afternoon. On her way out, she saw Briggs on the stairs. He hadn't run when he had the chance. She stopped and looked straight at him. He just looked back, his hands in plain sight. Clara told her that he wrote a letter but never sent it. Briggs spoke up, his voice quiet. He said he probably could not figure out what he wanted her to do with it. Clara asked him what he was going to do now. He looked down at his hands, then met her gaze again. He told her he had already told the judge everything he knew, all the names and dates. His voice was flat-tired, but underneath it she heard something like relief. He admitted Voss would claim he was just lying to save his own skin, and that it might even be partly true. He looked right at her and said he was not a good man, but there was one line he never crossed. He wanted that on the record. He said the order to go after James Whitmore was not his. He did not know it was coming until after it was done. Clara listened. She could not forgive him, not yet. But she believed him. She would tell Hargrove what he said. She walked out into the bright sun and the noise of the city. Down the street, Roy was holding a doctor's door open. Eli stood in the doorway, looking like a man running on pure grit. He was just waiting to see if she was all right. She followed them inside, and the doctor got right to work. Roy and Eli answered his questions. Eli's sentences were shorter than usual, a sign that the real exhaustion was setting in now that the fight was over. Clara found a chair and sat down, placing the satchel on her knees. She rested her hand on it and just breathed. She thought about her husband James, a little boy named Henry, and 47 other families. She thought of a judge just 2 blocks from here, reading the ledger that would change everything. She remembered being on her knees in the red Texas mud when a man on a horse reached out his hand to help. She could see the rough shape of what was to come. There would be a long legal battle, and she would need a place to stay. She would have to give testimony. The school she was meant to teach at was still waiting. And then there was Eli. She could not quite figure out that part of her future just yet. For today, it was enough that he was safe in the next room. His voice was low and steady. When she heard him say her name, she stood up and walked in. He was sitting on the examination table with a fresh bandage around his ribs. He asked her if Hargrove really had the ledger. She told him yes, and that the proceedings would start this week. She added that Briggs was giving testimony. Eli thought on that for a moment. She told him that Briggs said he did not know about what happened in Abilene and wanted it on the record. When Eli asked if she believed him, she said yes. "Henry," Eli said quietly. It was the same way he had said the name the night before, like a debt being paid. "Henry," Clara repeated. The doctor finished his work and announced that Eli would live. He then told Eli he was done moving for the day. Eli agreed, and the doctor looked at Clara to make sure she would enforce it. She agreed too. The room grew quiet as the afternoon heat began to break. "Clara," Eli started to say. She gently cut him off. "Not yet," she said. It was not a no, and it was not a never. It was its own kind of promise. "There is a lot of road between here and whatever comes next," she told him. "I know that," he answered. "But we are both still here," she said. He looked at her, his gaze steady. "Yeah," he said. "We are." She sat in the chair next to him, her hand resting on the satchel like it was something she planned on keeping forever. A few blocks away, a judge was reading a dead man's words, and the world was starting to shift. Just 3 days ago, Clara Whitmore had been on her knees in the mud with nothing. Now she was here, and for now, that was more than enough. 3 weeks later, Roy rode all the way to San Antonio to tell her the news in person. Decker Voss had been arrested at his ranch by 4 federal deputies. He did not fight it. He walked out to meet them in a pressed suit, like he was headed to a meeting. Clara figured he knew it was coming the minute she walked out of that building with the ledger. His lawyers had already filed 3 motions, but Judge Hargrove denied every single one before the sun went down. Hargrove's office had already reached out to 31 of the 47 families. The long work of making things right was just beginning, and Clara was ready for it. Roy's voice grew quiet, explaining some folks they found were broken. He said none of the families were surprised by the theft. They knew what was done. They just never knew someone had bothered to write it all down. Clara pictured James at their table, preserving the truth so it would not vanish. "My father's land," Roy said, the words heavy like a weight he had carried for miles. Hargrove mentioned compensation. "The land is gone, tangled up in sales, but they will get something." He stared into his coffee. "My father passed 2 years back. Always said somebody ought to answer for it." "Somebody will," Clara promised. "James made sure of it. You helped bring the truth to light. Your father's name is in that book. It is a federal matter now. It will not be forgotten." Roy simply nodded. He left the next morning after a firm handshake and a promise to visit if he was ever down San Antonio way again. Clara watched him go from the doorway of the boarding house, thinking about how the right people show up just when you need them. Inside, she penned 2 letters. The first was to Hargrove, confirming she would testify. The second went to the school board in the town she had been heading for, asking if the teaching job was still available. 4 days later, their reply came. The position was filled. After a moment, she wrote back, asking if they needed help in any other way. It was an impulse James would have understood, the simple refusal to quit just because things did not go as planned. She was waiting for their answer when Eli knocked. 2 sharp raps, direct and without fuss, just like everything else he did. In the past 3 weeks, she had learned his ways. He was staying at a hotel nearby and had tried to ride out twice already, only to return. She opened her door to find him looking better, though not whole. His shoulder was still tender, and a hardness lingered in his eyes. But he was more present than he had been. With his hat in his hand, he said, "I need to tell you something." She let him in, but he did not take a seat. He stood in the middle of the room while she sat on the bed. She waited. She had learned he just needed space to find his words. "I went to see Briggs," he finally said. He had waited 3 hours at the federal holding facility yesterday just to get 10 minutes with the man. "I had to hear it from him," Eli said, his jaw tight. "Briggs did not know about the fire. He told me straight, with nothing to gain from it." Eli paused. "Then he told me something else. Voss ordered the job himself. Hired a man Briggs never even knew. According to Briggs, he only found out 6 months later, and had been wrestling with that knowledge for 8 months since." "What did you say?" Clara asked. "Nothing to say." "Do you believe him?" she asked. "Yes." The word was heavy with certainty, a truth that cost something to hear and to hold. "I believe him too," she said. Eli stood perfectly still, a sign of deep thought she had come to recognize. "Does it change anything?" "No," he answered. "It does not change what happened to Eleanor or Henry." Saying his son's name seemed to cost less than before. "But it changes where I put the blame." "Where do you put it?" she asked gently. After a long moment, he said, "I am working on that." She nodded. It was an honest answer. She knew a grief like his did not just disappear. Like her own, it was something you learned to carry, so it no longer dictated your every step. "I am done bounty hunting," he announced. "Turned down 2 jobs already." He met her eyes directly. "Hargrove needs investigators, folks who know this territory, who can bring back the plain truth." He explained he would be working for the actual law, not for the highest bidder. "It would keep me here in this part of Texas for a spell," he added. The room fell quiet for a moment. "The school board wrote back," Clara said, her voice even. "The position is filled. I wrote them again, asking if they needed help with anything else. I am waiting to hear." Eli looked at her. "I am not going anywhere until this testimony is over." "That could be weeks," she replied. "And those 47 families will need help with paperwork, with statements, with remembering." She looked at her hands. "James kept books. I am a teacher. Both jobs are about making sure things are understood and carried on." She met his gaze. "I think that is what I am meant to do now." Eli watched her for a long time. "You know what makes you different from anyone I have met in 9 years?" She shook her head. "You do not quit," he said softly. "Not when you are beat down, not when your plans fall through, and not when you lose the person who is supposed to be right there with you." His words settled deep inside her. "James would have liked you," she said, a small smile forming. "He would have found you aggravating for 2 days, then decided you were the most honest man he had ever known. A good judge of people. He was right about Hargrove. He was right about Colton. He was right about a lot of things." "He was right about you," Eli said. She breathed. "He wrote to Hargrove and said his wife would come. Eli said he knew. He knew what you'd do, and he built the road ahead of time for you to do it on. He took 1 step toward her, not crossing anything, just closing a fraction of the distance. That's not nothing, Clara. That's a man who knew who he married." She stood up. She stood up because sitting felt like the wrong thing, and because 3 weeks of this, 3 weeks of the particular careful distance they'd maintained, the distance that was respectful and necessary, and also sometimes felt like holding her breath, had reached its natural limit. Not because everything was resolved, but because it didn't have to be resolved to be real. She took the step between them. She put her hand against his chest, careful of the shoulder, and she felt his heart under her palm, steady, present the same heartbeat she'd pressed her ear against on a road in the dark 3 weeks ago, and decided to trust. "I'm not replacing James," she said. "I know that," he said immediately. "I'm not replacing Eleanor." "I'm not." He put his hand over hers, the one on his chest. "I don't know what I am yet. I told you I'm working on it." "So am I," she said. "Okay," he said. "Okay." She said it wasn't a declaration, it wasn't a resolution. It was two people standing in a small room in San Antonio in the third week of July, 1882, with their histories fully present between them and their hands in contact, and the full knowledge that the road ahead was not clean or simple, or any of the things that roads and stories sometimes pretended to be. It was the most honest thing either of them had said in weeks. And then the knock came. Mrs. Aldridge's voice through the door, apologetic and efficient. "Mrs. Whitmore, letter came for you," marked urgent from Judge Hargrove's office. Clara stepped back. Eli stepped back. She crossed to the door and opened it and took the letter and thanked Mrs. Aldridge, who asked no questions and closed the door. She opened it. 2 lines. Hargrove's hand. "Voss has entered a plea. His lead attorney has requested a meeting with you personally. Claims his client wishes to make a direct statement to James Whitmore's widow before the proceedings begin. Your attendance is voluntary." She read it once. She handed it to Eli. He read it. His face did several things in quick succession and settled into something careful and watchful. "You don't have to go," he said. I know what he's trying to do." She said he's trying to put a face on it. He wants to see who he's dealing with. He wants to know if I can be moved. She took the letter back and folded it. "He's been running this territory for 20 years by knowing exactly how much pressure it takes to move a person. He wants to take my measure." And she set the letter on the table. "He already had his chance to take my measure." She said, "He sent men to my house on a Tuesday morning, and he took the most important person in my life. And he left me standing in a doorway to tell me what would happen if I didn't stop." Her voice was level, and her hands were steady, and every word was the plain truth. I didn't stop. I walked 300 miles through July mud, and I put James's ledger in front of a federal judge, and I'm going to sit in that courtroom when the time comes, and I'm going to say every word that needs to be said. She picked up her jacket from the back of the chair. "But I'm not going to that meeting," she said. She wrote this reply herself. 4 words in her own hand, nothing more. The record speaks for itself. She folded it, sealed it, and handed it to Mrs. Aldridge in the hall to be sent back to Hargrove's office. Then she came back into the room, and Eli was standing where she'd left him, hat still in his hand, with the expression of a man who had just watched something and was still working out how to hold it. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Your face, my face, does things." He said, "I told you that. What is it doing right now?" He looked at her for a moment, and then fully in a way she hadn't seen from him yet. Not the almost, not the not quite, but the actual thing. He smiled. "It's doing fine," he said. "It's doing just fine." Outside San Antonio kept its noise. Somewhere 2 blocks east, a federal judge was building the case that James Whitmore had started at a kitchen table with a lamp burning low, and the full understanding of what it would cost him. Somewhere in 31 homes across 3 counties, families who had lost their land were learning that someone had written their names down, and that the names had reached the right hands. Somewhere on a back road in the Texas Hill Country, a woman named Nell Briggs was probably wiping down her bar and waiting to hear how it all came out. Clara Whitmore had started this journey on her knees in the mud with nothing left and nowhere further to go. She was standing now, and she intended to keep standing for James, for Henry, for 47 families whose names were federal record now and always would be, and for herself, and for the man standing in her room with a real smile and a healed shoulder and 300 miles of shared road between them. She had not come this far to stop. She had never been the kind of woman who stopped. And now, at last, she had someone who knew.